The message arrived on a Tuesday morning, disrupting breakfast routines across every human colony from Earth to the furthest reaches of the Orion Arm. It wasn't subtle. The aliens made sure of that. Every screen, every holographic display, every neural interface lit up simultaneously with the same transmission. A massive ship, black as the void between stars, appeared in orbit around Earth. Its hull stretched for miles, covered in weapon arrays that looked like thorns on some cosmic rose. The ship's design screamed one thing: destruction. Commander Sarah Chun stood in the United Earth Defense Command headquarters, watching the alien vessel on the main screen. Around her, junior officers scrambled at their stations, pulling up data, running scans, checking defensive systems. But Sarah just sipped her coffee and smiled. "Ma'am, shouldn't we be concerned?" Lieutenant Torres asked, his voice cracking slightly. Sarah turned to face him. "Torres, how long have you been with the fleet?" "2 years, ma'am." "Then, you wouldn't know. Pull up the historical archives. File designation. First contact Zephyr." The young lieutenant's fingers flew over his console. His eyes widened as he read. This can't be right. These are the same aliens? From 6,000 years ago. "The very same," Sarah confirmed, turning back to the view screen. "The Zephyrians. They gave us quite the scare back then." The alien transmission began, cutting through all human communications. The voice that spoke was deep, multi-layered, as if 1,000 beings spoke in unison. The universal translator kicked in immediately. "Humans of Earth and your scattered colonies. We are the Zephyrian Empire. 6,000 years ago, we visited your world. You were primitive then, barely able to forge metal tools. We marked your species for future conquest, as is our right as the superior race. We have conquered 1,000 worlds, enslaved 100 species. Now, we return to claim what was always destined to be ours." The transmission showed images of the Zephyrian conquests. Worlds burning, cities reduced to ash, entire civilizations kneeling before their conquerors. The Zephyrians themselves appeared on screen, tall, serpentine beings with 6 arms and scales that shifted color like oil on water. Their eyes were compound, like an insect's, but filled with unmistakable intelligence and cruelty. "Your weapons are meaningless against our shields. Your ships are toys compared to our dreadnoughts. We give you 1 solar rotation to surrender unconditionally. Send your leaders to kneel before us, and we may show mercy. Resist, and we will glass your worlds and take your survivors as slaves." This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The transmission ended, leaving every human communication channel silent for a moment. Then, Sarah Chin laughed. It started as a chuckle, then grew into full-bodied laughter that echoed through the command center. Other officers began to join in, until the entire room was filled with the sound of human amusement. "Ma'am," Torres looked confused and slightly alarmed. "They just threatened to destroy us all." Sarah wiped a tear from her eye. "Oh, Torres. Sweet young Torres. Do you know what humanity was doing 6,000 years ago? Building the pyramids? Among other things, yes. We were also fighting each other with bronze spears and thinking the sun was a god riding a chariot across the sky. The Zephyrians saw us then and thought easy pickings. They marked us for future conquest and left, probably to subjugate some other poor species." She walked to the tactical display, gesturing at the data streams. "But they made one crucial mistake. They assumed we'd stay the same. They assumed that 6,000 years would mean nothing to us. They never bothered to check on us, never sent scouts, never monitored our progress." "And now?" Torres asked. "Now?" Sarah's smile turned predatory. "Now they're about to learn what happens when you give humanity 6 millennia to prepare for war." She turned to address the entire command center. "All stations, this is Commander Chun. Initialize Protocol Omega. Wake up the old gods." Across human space, ancient systems came online. Defense platforms that had been disguised as moons powered up. Entire asteroid belts revealed themselves to be carefully positioned kinetic weapons. Ships that had been mothballed for centuries began to hum with renewed life. Dr. Yuki Tanaka stood in his laboratory on Mars, watching his life's work finally serve its purpose. For generations, his family had maintained the quantum entanglement communicators, ensuring instant communication across human space. Now, every human world received the same message simultaneously. The Zephyrians have returned. Operation Long Game is now active. On Europa, beneath miles of ice, fusion reactors that have been running on minimal power for centuries roared to full capacity. The moon itself began to crack and shift, revealing the largest shipyard in human history. Thousands of vessels, built in secret over millennia, began to rise from the frozen depths. Admiral Kwame Okonkwo stood on the bridge of the USS Prometheus, humanity's first true warship. It had been built 5,000 years ago, then constantly upgraded, refined, and improved. To the outside observer, it looked like a simple cargo hauler. But beneath its disguised hull lay weapons that could crack planets. All ships reporting ready, Admiral, his tactical officer, announced. The Ghost Fleet is awakening. Good, Okonkwo nodded. How many do we have? Current count is 12,000 capital ships, 50,000 cruisers, and approximately 2 million fighter craft. The automated defense drones number in the billions. The Admiral smiled. And that's just the official fleet. Wait until the Zephyrians meet our privateers. In the asteroid belt, Captain Rex Wildcard Morrison received the activation signal aboard his ship, the Gambler's Folly. Around him, hundreds of other privateer vessels powered up. These weren't official military ships. They were the descendants of pirates, smugglers, and independent traders who had been given letters of marque generations ago. Their ships were ugly, asymmetrical things, built for function over form. But each one carried weapons that would make a Zephyrian dreadnought weep. While boys and girls, Rex announced over the privateer comm channel, looks like great-great-great-grandpappy's debt to society is finally getting called in. Time to earn those pardons our ancestors were promised. Back on Earth, the Zephyrian commander, Zar Theta, the Conqueror, waited for the pathetic human surrender. He had done this 1,000 times before. Small, primitive species always folded when faced with the might of the Empire. His tactical display showed no significant military movement from the humans. Good. They were paralyzed with fear. Supreme Commander, one of his subordinates hissed, we're detecting some energy signatures from the human colonies, but nothing that registers as weapons grade. Their technology appears to be primarily civilian in nature. As expected, Zar Theta replied, they've spent their time building comfortable lives instead of preparing for war. It will make them easier to control once they're slaves. He didn't notice the slight smile on the face of the human diplomat who had been brought aboard for the surrender negotiations. Ambassador Liu Wei had volunteered for this role, knowing full well it was likely a one-way trip. But she had a message to deliver. Supreme Commander, Liu said, bowing slightly, I've been authorized to deliver Earth's official response to your demands. Speak, Primitive. Tell me of your surrender. Liu straightened, looking the alien directly in his compound eyes. Humanity's response is as follows. No. Zar Theta's scales shifted to a deep purple, a sign of amusement. No. Just no. That's correct. No surrender. No kneeling. No slaves. Just no. You dare refuse the Zephyrian Empire? Do you not understand what we are capable of? Liu smiled. Oh, we understand perfectly. You see, Supreme Commander, you made a mistake 6,000 years ago. You showed us what was out there. You showed us that the universe was full of predators who would come for us eventually. And you gave us something precious, time. Time to build your pathetic cities. Time to spread across a handful of worlds like insects. Time to prepare, Liu corrected. Every human child for the last 200 generations has grown up knowing this day would come. We've been getting ready for you, Supreme Commander. Our entire civilization has been shaped by the knowledge that one day you would return. She pulled out a small device, a quantum communicator. Would you like to know what humanity has been doing for the last 6,000 years? Before Zar Theta could respond, Liu activated the device. Suddenly, The Zephyrian ship's sensors went wild. Contacts appeared everywhere. Ships powering up, weapons platforms activating, entire moons revealing themselves to be battle stations. "We've been busy," Luz said simply. The tactical officer's scales had turned white with fear. "Supreme Commander, we're detecting. This can't be right. The humans have over 15 million military vessels. Their smallest fighter craft outguns our cruisers. Their capital ships, by the Empire, their capital ships are the size of small moons." Zartheta stared at the display in disbelief. "Impossible. No species advances this fast. It's only been 6,000 years. Only," Lu laughed. "Supreme Commander, do you know how long 6,000 years is to humans? It's 240 generations. 240 generations of scientists building on each other's work. 240 generations of engineers refining our technology. 240 generations of soldiers training for this exact moment." She stepped closer to the viewing port, looking out Earth below. "You showed us the monster under the bed, and instead of cowering, we decided to become something worse. We reverse-engineered the technology you so carelessly displayed during your first visit. We found the ruins of civilizations you destroyed and learned from their mistakes. We even found some of your old enemies, species you thought you'd wiped out, hiding in the dark between stars. They were very eager to share what they knew about Zephyrian weaknesses. The human fleet was moving now, taking positions around the Zephyrian vessel. Each human ship was a testament to millennia of focused development. Where the Zephyrians had stagnated, content in their superiority, humanity had pushed forward relentlessly. "You want to know the funny part?" Lu continued. "We could have contacted you, could have told you to stay away. But we didn't. We wanted you to come back. We've been looking forward to this." "You're insane," Zartheta gasped. "Your entire species is insane." "Maybe," Lu agreed. "But we prefer the term motivated. You see, you united us in a way we could never have managed on our own. Every war between human nations ended with the same thought. We need to save our strength for the real enemy. Every resource we might have wasted on fighting each other went into preparing for you instead." The lights on the Zephyrian ship flickered. Their shields, so impervious to the weapons of other conquered races, began to fail under bombardment from human disruptor beams, weapons specifically designed over centuries to counter Zephyrian technology. "Oh," Lu added, almost as an afterthought, "you might want to check on your empire. We've been sending infiltration teams through quantum tunnels for the past 1,000 years. Right about now, every Zephyrian slave world is receiving a very special delivery. Across the galaxy, on 100 conquered worlds, hidden caches of human weapons were being distributed to slave populations. Resistance movements that have been carefully cultivated for centuries sprang into action. The Zephyrian Empire, built on the assumption of absolute superiority, began to burn from within. You planned all of this." Zartheta's voice had lost its imperious tone. Now there was only disbelief and growing fear. "Not me personally," Lu admitted. "I'm just the 2,847th person to hold the position of ambassador to the Zephyrians. My predecessor died of old age last year, having spent her entire life training for a moment that never came. Her predecessor did the same, and his before him. For 6,000 years, there's always been someone ready to stand where I'm standing now, to deliver this message." "What message?" Zartheta asked, though he dreaded the answer. Lu's smile was no longer diplomatic. It was the smile of a predator that had been patiently stalking its prey for millennia. "That humanity has been afraid before. We were afraid when you first appeared in our skies. We were afraid when we realized we weren't alone. We were afraid when we understood what you intended for us. But fear is a funny thing, Supreme Commander. You can let it paralyze you, or you can let it motivate you. Guess which one we chose?" The Zephyrian ship shook as more human weapons found their mark. Outside the viewports, the pride of the Zephyrian Empire was being systematically taken apart by weapons designed specifically to counter every defense, exploit every weakness. "We don't fear you anymore," Lu concluded. "We've had 6,000 years to get over it. Now, now we're just curious to see if you're as tough as our simulations predicted. Our military analysts are quite excited. They've been war-gaming this encounter for centuries, and they have a betting pool on how long you'll last. As if on cue, a massive human dreadnought decloaked directly above the Zephyrian vessel. The UES Remember Tomorrow was 5 miles long, bristling with weapons that bent space-time itself. Its captain's voice echoed through the Zephyrian bridge. Zephyrian vessel, this is Captain Maria Santos of the United Earth ship Remember Tomorrow. You have threatened humanity with slavery and extinction. Under Article 7 of the Terran Defense Charter, established 4,827 years ago, specifically for this moment, you are hereby notified that a state of war exists between our species. You asked us to kneel. Our answer is simple. Humanity kneels to no one. The war that the Zephyrians had promised lasted exactly 17 minutes. Their vaunted shields, impervious to the plasma weapons and kinetic strikes of every other species they conquered, crumbled like paper before weapons that targeted the specific quantum frequencies they operated on. Their hull armor, forged in the hearts of dying stars, was pierced by rounds of compressed dark matter that humans had been manufacturing for 3,000 years. Their proud warrior culture, built on the certainty of their superiority, shattered against an enemy that had spent 6 millennia preparing for this exact battle. When the Zephyrian flagship finally broke apart, its debris scattering across Earth's orbit, a cheer went up across human space. Not a cheer of survival, but of validation. 6,000 years of preparation, of sacrifice, of single-minded focus had led to this moment. But humanity wasn't done. In the command center, Sarah Chun opened a channel to the entire fleet. All ships, this is command. Phase 1 is complete. The Zephyrian Vanguard has been neutralized. Initialize Phase 2. It's time to pay their empire a visit. Across human space, engines roared to life. Quantum tunnels opened, creating doorways across the galaxy. The greatest armada in galactic history began to move, not in defense, but in offense. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the Terran Council, the governing body that had guided humanity's preparation for millennia. Council members, the Xenopsychology Department has analyzed the Zephyrian Empire structure. As we suspected, it's built entirely on the premise of their racial superiority. Once that illusion is shattered, their slave species will rise up. And our role? Council leader Ahmad asked. Liberation, Elena replied. We have weapons, medical supplies, and advisors ready to support every resistance movement. The Zephyrians created their own downfall by oppressing so many. We just need to give their victims the means to free themselves. The council voted unanimously. After 6,000 years of preparing for war, humanity would bring something the galaxy had never seen. A war of liberation on a galactic scale. As the human fleet departed, jumping through quantum space toward the heart of the Zephyrian Empire, Ambassador Lu Wei stood on the observation deck of the Remember Tomorrow. She had survived her encounter with Tsar Theta, rescued moments before his ship exploded. Now, she watched the stars blur past and thought about the generations who had come before, who had lived their entire lives preparing for a moment they would never see. Was it worth it? Captain Santos asked, joining her at the viewport. 6,000 years of preparation for a 17-minute battle. Lu considered the question. Ask me again when we've freed every slave in Zephyrian space. Ask me when we've shown the galaxy that humanity doesn't conquer, we liberate. Ask me when the last Zephyrian supremacist understands that marking us for conquest was the worst mistake their species ever made. She paused, then smiled. But if you want my opinion now, yes. It was worth every second. Because we didn't just prepare for war, Captain. We prepared to win. And now we're going to show the galaxy what humanity is really capable of. The stars streaked past as the human armada raced toward its destiny. 6,000 years of fear had been transformed into purpose. And the galaxy would never be the same. The quantum tunnel collapsed behind the human armada as they emerged in the Zirian system, the first of 17 major Zephyrian strongholds. What greeted them was a sight that would have broken the spirit of any conventional invasion force. 300 Zephyrian dreadnoughts hung in perfect formation around the planet, their weapons already charging. Behind them, a network of defense satellites created an overlapping field of fire that could vaporize anything that came too close. Admiral Okonkwo studied the tactical display from the bridge of the Prometheus. They've pulled back their patrol fleets. Smart. They're consolidating their forces. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Zephyrian Fleet Commander, his communications officer reported. Put it through. The holographic image that appeared showed a Zephyrian even larger than Zar Theta had been. This one's scales were scarred from countless battles, and cybernetic implants replaced 2 of its 6 arms. I am Zarkon, the unbroken shield of the Empire. You humans have had your moment of surprise. It will not happen again. Turn back now, or face the full might of warriors who have never known defeat. Okonkwo smiled slightly. Zarkon, I'm Admiral Kwame Okonkwo of the United Earth Fleet. I appreciate your offer, but we didn't come all this way to turn around. We have business with your empire. You destroyed 1 ship. Zarkon roared. 1 ship that was caught off guard. Do you truly believe you can stand against our entire fleet? Well, Okonkwo mused. Let's find out. All ships, execute Pattern Hydra 7. The human fleet moved with a precision that would have made any choreographer weep with joy. Ships that had been clustered together suddenly, scattered in 3 dimensions, moving in seemingly random patterns that were actually precisely calculated. The Zephyrian weapons, designed to target the predictable attack patterns of their usual enemies, found themselves firing at empty space. Meanwhile, humanity's smallest fighters began their work. These weren't the lumbering bombers that most species used. Each human fighter was piloted by someone who had been training in simulators since childhood, flying craft that could pull maneuvers that would liquefy most organic pilots. They danced between the Zephyrian laser fire, delivering precise strikes to shield generators and weapon arrays. Sir, the Kingfisher Squadron is requesting permission to deploy the Wasps, came a report. Permission granted. Let's see how they handle a swarm. From the belly of a human carrier, millions of tiny drones no bigger than a fist spilled out into space. The Zephyrians initially ignored them. What could such small devices do against their mighty ships? They learned quickly. The drones attached themselves to Zephyrian hulls and began eating through them with molecular disassemblers, creating hull breaches faster than emergency systems could seal them. But the Zephyrians hadn't conquered 1,000 worlds by giving up easily. Zarkon ordered his fleet to adapt, switching to wide-beam weapons that could sweep away the drones in vast swaths. Their fighters launched in counterattack, piloted by warriors who had been bred for combat over centuries. The battle became a deadly dance in the void. Human and Zephyrian fighters twisted around each other, trading fire in split-second exchanges. Capital ships exchanged broadsides that lit up the darkness, each impact releasing energies that would have powered cities. On the planet below, something else was happening. In the slave quarters of the mining complexes, packages that had been smuggled in over decades began to open. Weapons, yes, but also something more important, communicators that connected the slaves to human tactical networks. A Rillan slave named Thex held this strange device in his 4-fingered hand, hardly daring to believe what he was hearing. This is Lieutenant Commander Chen Lu of Human Liberation Forces. To all enslaved beings in the Zirian system, your time has come. We are transmitting tactical data on Zephyrian weak points. Their warriors are focused on us. Their guards are at minimum strength. If you're going to fight for your freedom, now is the time. Thex looked at his fellow slaves, Rillans like himself, but also Korthi, Nebulans, and a dozen other species. For generations, they had labored under Zephyrian whips, their spirits broken by centuries of oppression. But now, holding human weapons and seeing the Zephyrian fleet actually struggling in the space above, something long dead began to stir. Hope. They said no one could stand against the Zephyrians, a Korti slave whispered. The humans are, Thex replied, checking the charge on his new plasma rifle. And they're winning. Back in space, the battle had reached a crucial moment. The Zephyrian fleet, despite their initial shock, was beginning to rally. Their superior numbers were starting to tell, and several human ships were burning. Admiral, the Yorktown, and the Bismarck are requesting emergency support, Tactical reported. They're being focused by 12 dreadnoughts. Negative. Tell them to hold position. It's time for the reveal. Okonkwo activated his fleet-wide comm. All ships, drop the masks. Show them what we really are. Across the human fleet, ships began to change. What had appeared to be standard hull plating fell away, revealing additional weapon systems. Cargo pods split open, disgorging hidden fighter wings. Most dramatically, several ships that had seemed to be moderately sized cruisers unfolded like origami, expanding to their true size. Battleships that dwarfed even the Zephyrian dreadnoughts. Zarkon's compound eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible. Our scans showed you what we wanted you to see. Okonkwo's voice came over the comm. Did you really think we'd show our true strength in the first engagement? We've been holding back, Zarkon. Testing your capabilities. Gathering data. The real battle starts now. The UES Prometheus itself began to transform. Sections of its hull reconfigured, revealing a spinal-mounted weapon that ran nearly the entire length of the ship. Energy began to build along its length, crackling with barely contained power. Sir, the Nova Cannon is charged and ready, weapons reported. Target their command ship. Let's see how unbroken Zarkon really is. The weapon fired. A lance of pure annihilation crossed the void, punching through shields, armor, and bulkheads as if they were tissue paper. Zarkon's dreadnought, pride of the Zephyrian fleet, split in half like a melon struck by a sword. The psychological impact was immediate. The Zephyrian fleet, already struggling against human tactics they had never encountered, saw their legendary commander destroyed in a single shot. Their formation began to waver. Pour it on, Okonkwo commanded. Don't give them time to regroup. The human fleet pressed its advantage. Ships that had been playing defense suddenly surged forward, their weapons finding gaps in Zephyrian shields that their AIs had been analyzing throughout the battle. The wasps, which the Zephyrians thought they had dealt with, revealed their true purpose. They had been mapping shield frequencies, transmitting data back to the human fleet for precisely targeted strikes. On the planet's surface, the slave rebellion had erupted into full revolution. Thex led a charge on the main garrison, his fellow slaves fighting with the fury of beings who had nothing left to lose. The Zephyrian guards, used to dealing with broken, spiritless workers, found themselves facing warriors armed with human weapons and centuries of pent-up rage. Push forward, Thex roared, firing his plasma rifle at a Zephyrian overseer who had tormented him for decades. For our children, for our freedom. The overseer's personal shield flickered and died under the barrage. The look of shock on his face as Thex's shots found their mark was worth a lifetime of suffering. In orbit, the battle was becoming a rout. The remaining Zephyrian ships tried to retreat, only to find that human interdiction cruisers had been quietly deploying gravity mines throughout the battle. Ships attempting to enter hyperspace found themselves trapped, their engines screaming as they fought against artificial singularities. But humanity wasn't interested in simple destruction. As Zephyrian ships surrendered, boarding pods launched from human vessels. Marines in power armor that would have been science fiction even a century ago stormed through breached hulls, but they weren't there to slaughter. They were there to liberate. Sergeant Maya Patel led her squad through the corridors of a Zephyrian cruiser, her suit's sensors highlighting life signs. Remember your training, people. Zephyrian crew to the detention areas, but any slaves we find are to be treated as refugees. Medical has aid stations ready. They breached a door to find a group of Telari huddled in what was clearly a slave pen. The amphibian beings cowered at first, expecting death. Then they saw the human symbols on the Marines' armor and heard words in their own language coming from the suit's translators. You're safe now. We're here to take you home. One of the Telari, an elder judging by the gray in his fins, began to weep. Home? We have no home. The Zephyrians destroyed our world 200 years ago. Maya knelt beside him, her armor's servos whirring softly. Then, we'll help you find a new one, or help you rebuild the old one. That's what humans do. We fix things. We help. And we remember. She offered her armored hand. Come on, let's get you to safety. As the battle wound down, the statistics were staggering. Of 300 Zephyrian dreadnoughts, only 43 remained functional. The vaunted defense satellites were so much debris. On the planet, the slave revolution had seized control of every major facility. Admiral Okonkwo surveyed the aftermath from his bridge. They had won decisively, but he felt no joy. This was just the beginning. Comms, open a channel to all Zephyrian survivors and to the planet below. Channel open, sir. This is Admiral Okonkwo of the United Earth Fleet. To the Zephyrian military personnel who have surrendered, you will be treated according to the conventions of warfare established by humanity 3,000 years ago. You will not be tortured, enslaved, or executed. This is not mercy. This is civilization. To the former slaves of Zirian, you are free. Human medical teams and engineers stand ready to assist you in whatever path you choose. To the Zephyrian Empire at large, this is just the first. We're coming for every slave world, every oppressed species, every being held in chains. You have one chance to avoid this fate. Free your slaves, dismantle your empire of oppression, and we can talk. Continue as you are, and face the same fate as Zirian. The choice is yours. He cut the channel and turned to his staff. Signal the fleet. Phase 1 of liberation is complete. Prepare for quantum jump to the next target. And send word back to Earth. Tell them Zirian burns with the fire of freedom. As the human fleet prepared to depart, leaving behind a world in the throes of liberation and Zephyrian wreckage floating in the void, messages began to spread across the galactic communication networks. The impossible had happened. The Zephyrians, undefeated for millennia, had been broken in a single battle. On a dozen slave worlds, beings who had given up hope looked up at the stars with new eyes. The humans were coming. Freedom was coming. In the depths of the Zephyrian capital, the Supreme Overlord received the news of Zirian's fall. For the first time in its long life, it felt something the Zephyrians had inflicted on countless others, but never experienced themselves. Fear. Summon the War Council, it commanded. Recall all fleets. The humans, what are they? Its advisor, old even by Zephyrian standards, consulted ancient records. Supreme One, I've found references to their home world from our initial survey. The notes are concerning. Explain. The survey team noted that humans were remarkably adaptable. They survived in climates that would kill most species. They showed unusual problem-solving abilities. And the advisor paused. They recommended immediate conquest or extermination. They said if humans were given time to develop, they could become a threat. And we gave them 6,000 years, the Overlord hissed. Yes, Supreme One. We gave him 6,000 years. The Overlord scales shifted through a spectrum of colors, each representing a different emotion. Fear, rage, disbelief, and, finally, a color rarely seen on a Zephyrian. Uncertainty. Meanwhile, in the liberated Zirian system, Feck stood in what had been the Overseer's office, looking out at the mining complex where he had spent his entire life in chains. Human engineers were already arriving, not to take over, but to teach, to help, to ensure that when they left, Zirian could stand on its own. What will you do now? Lieutenant Commander Chun Lu asked him. Fex considered the question. Freedom was so new, so strange. I think I'll learn. The humans have schools, yes? Places where anyone can gain knowledge. We do. And we'd be honored to have you. Then I'll learn. And then I'll teach. And maybe, someday, I'll help liberate others as you've liberated us. He turned to the human, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You gave us back our lives, our dignity. How can we ever repay that? Chen Lu smiled. You don't repay freedom, Thex. You pass it on. That's what we learned in our 6,000 years of preparation. The greatest weapon against tyranny isn't a Nova cannon or a fleet of warships. It's the simple idea that every sentient being deserves to be free. Spread that idea, and you'll have repaid us 1,000 times over. As the first Xerian sun set on a world without Zephyrian rule for the first time in centuries, similar scenes were beginning to play out across the galaxy. The human fleet, rather than resting on their laurels, was already moving to the next target. 16 more strongholds, hundreds of slave worlds, billions of beings waiting for liberation. The Zephyrians had promised humanity war. They had no idea that humanity had been promising them the same thing for 6,000 years. And humanity always kept its promises. The Zephyrian War Council convened in the Obsidian Chamber, deep beneath the capital city of Zephyros Prime. For 3,000 years, this room had witnessed the planning of countless conquests. Now, for the first time, it would plan a defense. Supreme Overlord Kex Theta coiled on the command dais, watching as the Empire's greatest military minds slithered into position. Their scales were dull with worry, a far cry from the vibrant displays of confidence they usually showed. "Report," Kex Theta commanded. War Master Jaxtorn brought up the holographic display. Where once the map showed the vast expanse of Zephyrian control in brilliant purple, now patches of gray were spreading like a disease. In the past 7 days, the humans have liberated 12 of our 17 primary strongholds. Our fleet strength has been reduced by 60%. More concerning, slave revolts are erupting on worlds the humans haven't even reached yet. "Impossible," growled Fleet Commander Sarvez. "Slaves cannot coordinate across such distances." "They can when given human quantum communicators," Jaxtorn replied. "The humans didn't just attack our strongholds. They've been seeding rebellion for decades, possibly centuries. Every world we've lost has revealed hidden weapon caches, communication networks, and trained resistance cells we never detected." Kex Theta's primary eyes focused on the strategic display. "Show me the pattern of their attacks." The map shifted, displaying the human fleet movements. There was no pattern, or rather, that was the pattern. The humans struck seemingly at random, appearing without warning through quantum tunnels, devastating defense fleets, and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. "They're not following standard conquest protocols," noted intelligence master Zarkes. "They take no territory, establish no permanent bases. They destroy our military assets, arm the slaves, provide basic infrastructure support, and leave. It's unprecedented. What of our attempts to predict their next target?" Kex Theta asked. "Useless. We've tried 17 different predictive models. The humans seem to be operating on pure chaos theory, or they have a strategic algorithm so complex our computers cannot decode it." What the Zephyrians didn't know was that humanity's target selection was actually quite simple. In a bunker on Earth, a group of former slaves from various species worked with human strategists, identifying which worlds had the most suffering, the most urgent need for liberation. The attack pattern made no military sense because it wasn't following military logic, it was following humanitarian priorities. "What of diplomatic solutions?" asked Elder Kixura, the oldest member of the council. "Perhaps we can negotiate." "They don't respond to our communications," Jaxtorn interrupted. "Every attempt at negotiation is met with the same message. Free all slaves unconditionally. Dismantle the Empire. Then we'll talk." "Unacceptable," roared Sarvez. "We are Zephyrians. We do not bow to inferior species." "Inferior." Kixera's scales flickered with something like doubt. "They've destroyed over half our fleet in a week. Their technology surpasses ours in every measurable way. Their tactics are beyond our comprehension. In what way are they inferior?" The chamber fell silent. To question Zephyrian superiority was heresy, but the evidence was undeniable. Meanwhile, 3 quantum jumps away, the human fleet materialized in the Kalos system. This wasn't a military stronghold, but an agricultural world, one of hundreds that fed the Zephyrian Empire. The defense fleet here was minimal, 40 ships at most, crewed by warriors considered too old or too young for frontline service. Captain Rex Morrison of the Gamblers fully surveyed the tactical situation. "Well, this is almost unfair." Jenkins, what does intelligence say about the slave population? Approximately 4 billion, Captain. Mostly agri. They're herbivores naturally suited to agricultural work. The Zephyrians have been using them as farmers for 800 years. 800 years of slavery, Rex muttered. All right, people. You know the drill. Disable, don't destroy. These Zephyrian crews are just following orders. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 12 minutes. The defenders fought bravely, but hopelessly. Human precision strikes disabled engines and weapons while leaving life support intact. Boarding teams secured the ships with minimal casualties on either side. But the real victory was happening on the planet's surface. Dr. Kenji Nakamura led a team of human agriculturalists to the largest farming complex, where thousands of agri worked the fields under the watch of Zephyrian overseers. The overseer, a relatively young Zephyrian named Laxter, raised his neural whip as the humans approached. Back! I'll not have you disrupting the harvest. The Empire must be fed. Dr. Nakamura raised his hands peacefully. We're not here to disrupt anything. We're here to make an offer. He looked past Laxter to the agri workers, who watched with their large, gentle eyes. We're here to offer you a choice. They have no choice. Laxter said. They are property of the Empire. Not anymore, Nakamura said calmly. Behind him, human cargo shuttles began landing, disgorging not soldiers but teachers, doctors, and engineers. As of this moment, every being on this world is free. What they do with that freedom is up to them. An elderly agri stepped forward, her fur grayed with age. Free? We don't understand. Who will tell us when to plant? When to harvest? Where to live? Nakamura smiled gently. You will. That's what freedom means. But we're not going to abandon you. We have agricultural experts ready to teach sustainable farming methods, medical teams to treat injuries and malnutrition, engineers to build proper housing. Everything you need to transform from slaves to citizens of your own world. Lies. Laxter activated his neural whip, but before he could strike, a containment field enveloped him. Human security forces emerged from seemingly nowhere. No one will be hurt, the security chief announced. Not the Agri, and not the Zephyrians. Those who wish to leave peacefully will be provided transport to Zephyrian space. Those who wish to stay and work alongside the Agri as equals are welcome to do so. The elderly Agri looked at the fields stretching to the horizon. We could keep all the food we grow. Feed our children first, not last. Every grain, Nakamura confirmed. In fact, with the techniques we'll teach you, you'll grow far more than you do now. Enough to feed yourselves and trade the surplus. Real trade, where you get fair value, not tribute to an empire. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Some Zephyrian overseers fought and were subdued. Others, surprisingly, chose to stay. Laxter's assistant, a female named Vexera, shocked everyone by laying down her whip and asking to learn these new farming methods. Why? Nakamura asked her during a break in the initial organization. Baxara skalas shifta unsartaidi. I've been stationed here for 30 years. I've watched the Agri work themselves to death to meet quotas. I've seen their children starve so that wealthy Zephyrians could feast. I started to question. But questioning meant death in the Empire. She looked at the Agri, now talking excitedly about crop rotation and soil management. Perhaps there's a different way. Back on Zephyros Prime, such heresy was spreading. The War Council had been in session for 3 days straight, and no solution had presented itself. Every strategy they devised was countered by human unpredictability. Every weapon they deployed was neutralized by human adaptability. We need to understand them, Elder Kixera finally said. How they think, why they fight this way. Intelligence Master, what do we actually know about human psychology? Zarkes consulted the archives. Very little. The initial survey, 6,000 years ago, was cursory at best. However, I've been analyzing their battle tactics and liberation protocols. There's something unusual. Explain. They're not maximizing efficiency. A proper conquest would establish control over each system extract resources, build forward bases. The humans do none of this. They seem more concerned with minimizing casualties, even our casualties, than with strategic advantage. Weakness. Sarvespat. Is it? Zarkes brought up casualty reports. Our warriors fight to the death because they fear what conquerors usually do to the defeated. But humans treat prisoners well, even offering them chances to integrate into liberated societies. As a result, more of our forces are surrendering. They're defeating us with mercy. The word hung in the air like a foreign concept. The Zephyrian language had no real equivalent. The closest translation was temporary weakness, but what the humans displayed wasn't temporary, and it certainly wasn't weakness. In the liberated territories, the true scope of the human plan was becoming clear. This wasn't just about freeing slaves, it was about building something new. On Zirian, Fex had been elected to the Planetary Council, working with human advisors to establish a government. On Kalos, the Agri were forming agricultural cooperatives, sharing knowledge that had been hidden for generations. Most remarkably, the various liberated species were beginning to work together. The Korthi, with their gift for mathematics, helped the Rillans design new cities. The Nebulans, masters of hydroponics, shared techniques with the Agri farmers. A galactic community was forming, bound not by conquest, but by shared experience and mutual support. Ambassador Lu Wei, now serving as humanity's chief liaison to the liberated worlds, stood before a gathering of representatives from 30 freed species. We're not here to create a human empire. We're here to ensure that no empire like the Zephyrians can rise again. Each world will govern itself. But we propose an alliance, a coalition of free worlds, where each member supports the others, where knowledge is shared freely, where any threat to one is a threat to all. The response was unanimous approval. Species that had been kept separate and hostile by Zephyrian manipulation now saw the strength in unity. In her private moments, Lu often thought about the conversation with Zar Theta, the Zephyrian commander who had started all this. He had promised humanity slavery and death. Instead, his threat had sparked the greatest liberation movement in galactic history. The war raged on, but its character was changing. As more worlds were liberated, more species joined the fight. Former slaves, trained by human instructors and armed with human weapons, formed liberation armies of their own. The Zephyrian Empire found itself fighting not just humanity, but a growing coalition of its former victims. On a reconnaissance mission deep in Zephyrian space, Scout Captain Lisa Park discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in an asteroid field, protected by the highest level of security, was a Zephyrian research station. But this wasn't weapons research. "Captain, you need to see this," her science officer called out. These are historical records. Real ones, not the propaganda they usually keep." Park reviewed the data, her eyes widening. "Give me a secure channel to Admiral Okonkwo. Priority 1. The records revealed the truth about the Zephyrian Empire. They hadn't always been conquerors. 3,000 years ago, they had been explorers, scientists, artists. Then came the catastrophe, a plague that nearly wiped them out, saved only by radical genetic modification that made them stronger, faster, more aggressive. But it also made them paranoid, xenophobic, convinced that only through dominance could they ensure their survival. The empire was built on fear. Fear of extinction. Fear of weakness. Fear of other species doing to them what the plague had almost done. In a twisted way, they were victims too, victims of their own trauma, perpetuating a cycle of violence and oppression. "This changes our approach," Admiral Okonkwo said after reviewing the data. "We're not just fighting an evil empire. We're fighting a traumatized species that turned its fear into everyone else's suffering." "So what do?" Park asked. "We show them there's another way. That strength doesn't require oppression. That security doesn't demand slavery. It won't be easy. They've had 3,000 years to entrench these beliefs. But if we could overcome our fear of them, perhaps they can overcome their fear of everyone else." The human strategy shifted. Alongside military liberation, They began broadcasting the historical records to Zephyrian populations, not as propaganda, but as truth. This is who you were, the messages said. This could be who you are again. On Zephyros Prime, the broadcast caused chaos. Citizens who had never questioned the Empire's necessity now learned it was born from tragedy, not destiny. Young Zephyrians, already doubtful about their society's righteousness, began to organize. Not for conquest, but for change. Elder Kixera watched the social fabric of the Empire unravel and felt relief. Perhaps the humans have given us a gift, she mused to her assistant. A gift, Elder? They're destroying everything we've built. Are they? Or are they showing us that what we built was a prison? For our slaves? Yes, but also for ourselves? We've spent 3 millennia afraid of the universe. The humans spent 6 millennia preparing to face their fears. Which species seems stronger to you? The question had no easy answer. But across the galaxy, in council chambers and slave quarters, in human warships and Zephyrian homes, the same realization was dawning. The war wasn't really about conquest or liberation. It was about choosing between fear and hope. And hope, it seemed, was winning. The revolution began not with weapons, but with words. In the sprawling undercity of Zephyros Prime, where the lower castes lived in perpetual shadow, a young Zephyrian named Hexali stood before a crowd of her people. Her scales, dulled by a lifetime of poor nutrition, lacked the lustrous sheen of the warrior elite. But her voice carried something more powerful than any neural whip. They tell us we are superior, she called out, holding a datapad containing the historical records the humans had broadcast. They tell us conquest is our birthright. But look at what we were before the fear took hold. We were artists. We were builders. We created beauty, not chains. The crowd stirred uneasily. Such words would normally mean death, but the enforcement squads were busy. Half were deployed to the front lines, dying in battles against an enemy that seemed to predict their every move. The other half were trying to contain slave revolts on 100 worlds. For the first time in centuries, the lower castes of Zephyros Prime could speak freely. My brood sister was sent to fight the humans, an elderly worker called out. Her final message said they treated her with more dignity as a prisoner than the Empire ever did as a soldier. They're teaching her engineering. Teaching, when has the Empire taught us anything but obedience? Above, in the crystal spires where the elite dwelled, Supreme Overlord Kex Theta received reports of the growing unrest with mounting despair. Everything was falling apart. The empire that had stood for 3 millennia was crumbling in weeks. Supreme One, Intelligence Master Zarkess entered, her scales pattern indicating extreme agitation. I have urgent intelligence. More defeats? More revolts? More of our own people joining the enemy. Kex Theta's voice was bitter. No, Supreme One. The humans, they're coming here. To Zephyros Prime. The chamber fell silent. Even in their darkest projections, they hadn't imagined the humans would dare strike at the heart of the Empire. Our defenses will not stop them, Zarkess interrupted, an unthinkable breach of protocol that showed how far things had deteriorated. But, Supreme One, they're not coming as conquerors. They've broadcast their intentions. They're coming to negotiate. Negotiate. Kex Theta's scales flashed through a dozen colors. After all this, they want to talk. Their message was simple. The war can end today. Meet with us, not as conquerors and conquered, but as beings who both understand fear and seek something better. In the human fleet, preparations were underway for the most crucial phase of the operation. Admiral Okonkwo stood in the strategic planning room with his senior staff, but also with an unusual addition to any war council. Philosophers, historians, xenopsychologists, and former slaves who had become scholars of their oppressors. We could glass their planet from orbit, General Harrison pointed out, gesturing at the tactical display. And this definitively. And prove we're no better than they are, Dr. Elena Vasquez countered. We spent 6,000 years preparing for this moment. Not to become conquerors, but to break the cycle of conquest itself. The Zephyrians understand strength, Ambassador Luwei added. But they've only known one kind, the strength to dominate. We need to show them the strength to forgive, to build, to choose trust over fear. It's a hell of a risk, Harrison muttered. Yes, Okonkwo agreed. But what's the alternative? We destroy them, and someday, somewhere, another traumatized species will rise to fill the void. Or we try something unprecedented. We heal the wound instead of just cauterizing it. The human armada emerged from quantum space at the edge of the Zephyros system with a force that made their previous attacks look like scouting missions. Over 1 million vessels, not just human, but crewed by liberated species who had chosen to stand with their liberators. The message was clear: we could destroy you, but we choose not to. The Zephyrian home fleet, still formidable despite their losses, formed defensive formations. 3,000 ships, each crewed by warriors ready to die for their world. The space between the fleets crackled with targeting sensors and weapon charges. Then, something unprecedented happened. A single human shuttle launched from the flagship, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Ambassador Lu Wei. I am unarmed and approaching under flag of truce. I request permission to address the Zephyrian leadership. The shuttle flew slowly through the void between the fleets, vulnerable to any trigger-happy gunner. But no shots came. Even the most hardline Zephyrian warriors were curious about these insane humans who conquered through mercy and now flew undefended into the heart of enemy territory. In the throne room of the Imperial Palace, Kex Theta coiled upon the ancient seat of power, surrounded by the War Council. When Lu Wei entered, escorted by guards whose weapons seemed redundant against this small, seemingly fragile human, the contrast was stark. Supreme Overlord, Lu bowed slightly, enough to show respect, but not submission. Thank you for receiving me. You have courage, human. Or foolishness. Perhaps they are the same. Kex Theta studied her with all 6 eyes. Speak your terms of surrender. I'm not here for your surrender. I'm here for your liberation. The council hissed in confusion and anger. You dare mock us? War Master Jax Torn demanded. I dare to tell you the truth, Lu replied calmly. For 3,000 years, you've been prisoners of your own fear. You've built an empire of chains, but the strongest chains are the ones binding you. The fear of weakness, the fear of extinction, the fear that without constant dominance, you'll be destroyed. She activated a small holographic projector, showing images that the Zephyrians recognized, their world before the plague, their ancestors creating art, exploring the stars in peace, living without the constant paranoia that now defined their existence. We know your history. We know why you became what you are. A plague nearly destroyed you. And, in your trauma, you decided the only safety was in subjugating everyone else. But look what it's cost you. Your art is gone. Your science stagnates. Your children know only war. You survive, yes, but have you truly lived? Elder Kixera leaned forward. And what would you have us do? Bare our throats to the universe? Trust that others won't do to us what we've done to them? Yes, Lu said simply. That's exactly what we're asking. Because the alternative, continuing this cycle of fear and violence, ends only one way. Either you destroy everyone else and live alone in a dead galaxy, or someone destroys you. Fear offers no future. Easy word from the victors, Sarvez snarled. You humans, with your fleets surrounding our world, speak of trust. Lu smiled sadly. Do you know why we're really here, War Master? Not to conquer, but to show you what we learned in our 6,000 years of preparation. We learned that the best way to destroy an enemy is to transform them into a friend. We learned that true strength isn't in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to choose not to. She paused, looking at each council member. We spent millennia preparing for war with you. Every human child grew up knowing the Zephyrians would return. We could have let that define us, let fear of you shape us into something as twisted as what you became. Instead, we chose to let it inspire us. We said, if they're coming, we'll be ready. But ready to win, not just to survive. Ready to break the cycle, not perpetuate it. And if we refuse, Kex Theta asked, if we choose to fight to the end, then You'll lose, Lu said bluntly. Your empire is already gone. Your slaves are free. Your people are questioning everything. You can die as the last supreme overlord of a failed empire, or you can live as the first leader of a reborn Zephyrian people. The choice is yours. Outside, in the streets of the capital, the revolution had spread. But it wasn't the violent overthrow the elite had feared. Instead, Zephyrians of all castes were gathering, sharing the suppressed histories, imagining a different future. Some warriors laid down their arms, refusing to fight for a lie. Others joined the crowds, their lifetime of discipline redirected toward building rather than destroying. Hexali stood before the main broadcast center, protected by a ring of citizens, including some warriors who had chosen their people over their programming. Today, we reclaim our true heritage, she declared, her words carrying across the planet. Not as conquerors, but as creators. Not as oppressors, but as partners in a galactic community. In orbit, something remarkable was happening. Ships from liberated worlds were broadcasting messages to Zephyros Prime. Not threats or demands for revenge, but offers of assistance. The Agri offered to share their agricultural knowledge. The Korthi proposed mathematical collaborations. The Rillan spoke of joint engineering projects. They should hate us, Zarkes whispered, watching the messages stream in. We enslaved them for centuries. They do hate what you did, Lu acknowledged. But they've chosen to hope for what you could become. That's what freedom does. It gives you choices, even the choice to forgive. The debate in the throne room raged for hours. Hardliners like Sarvez argued for a final, glorious battle. Moderates like Kixera pointed out the futility of continued resistance. Kex Theta remained silent, processing everything. Finally, as the Zephyrian sun began to set, casting long shadows through the crystal windows, the Supreme Overlord spoke. For 3,000 years, we have ruled through fear. And for 3,000 years, we have lived in fear. Perhaps it is time to try something else. The ancient being's scales shifted to a color rarely seen, the deep blue of contemplation, of possibility. What would this transformation require? Lu felt a surge of hope. First, immediate cessation of all hostile actions. Release of any remaining slaves in Zephyrian space. Then, truth and reconciliation commissions, where your victims can speak and be heard. Reparations to worlds you've damaged. And, most importantly, a commitment to joining the galactic community as equals, not overlords. You ask us to abandon everything we are, Jax Torn protested. No, Lu corrected gently. We're asking you to remember everything you were before fear made you forget. Look at your own people in the streets. They're not abandoning Zephyrian nature. They're reclaiming it. The vote, when it came, was closer than anyone expected. But, in the end, led by Kixera and, surprisingly, Kex Theta herself, the Council chose transformation over destruction. The announcement echoed across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire, terror of 1,000 worlds, officially dissolved itself. In its place would rise the Zephyrian Republic, committed to making amends and joining the community of free worlds. Not everyone accepted it. Die-hard supremacists fled to the outer systems, vowing to continue the fight. But they found few followers. The majority of Zephyrians, exhausted by millennia of fear and warfare, chose hope. The transformation wasn't easy. Former slaves had to overcome justified anger. Zephyrians had to unlearn generations of supremacist conditioning. But with human guidance and the support of the coalition of free worlds, the impossible became possible. 6 months later, Hexali stood in the same throne room where the Empire had ended. But now was the Hall of Representatives, where Zephyrians of all castes and even former slaves worked together to build something new. She wore the simple robes of a counselor, having been elected by the Undercity district she had helped liberate. Beside her stood Thex, the Rillan who had led the uprising on Zirian. He was part of the Reconciliation Commission, helping to heal the wounds between species. Did you ever imagine this? Hexali asked him. When I was in chains? Never. Even when the humans first arrived, I thought they would simply become new masters. He smiled, an expression his facial structure made awkward but genuine. But they showed us all a different way. Strength without oppression, pride without supremacy, future without fear. In the human fleet, Admiral Okonkwo prepared for the journey home. The war was over, but the work continued. Other empires existed among the stars, other cycles of oppression and fear. But now humanity had allies, a coalition of free worlds united by shared values rather than conquest. Was it what you expected, Admiral? His aide asked as Earth appeared on the view screen. Okonkwo considered the question. No, I expected a war. What we got was a transformation. 6,000 years ago, they made us afraid. We spent all that time preparing to make them afraid in return. Instead, we chose to make them free. And in doing so, we freed ourselves from the fear they gave us. The aide nodded, then asked, "What do you think our ancestors would say? The ones who started preparing for this day?" "I think," the Admiral said slowly, "they would be amazed. They prepared us for war, but somehow in all that preparation, we learned something greater. We learned that the ultimate human response to fear isn't violence, it's hope. And hope, it turns out, is the most powerful weapon in the universe." As Earth grew larger in the view screen, blue and green and beautiful, Okonkwo allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. The long watch was over. The fear that had driven humanity for 6 millennia had been transformed into something beautiful, a galactic community built on freedom, cooperation, and mutual respect. But even as he celebrated, part of him remained vigilant. The universe was vast, and other threats might emerge. But now humanity wouldn't face them alone. They had done more than defeat an enemy. They had created a family of worlds, united in the belief that hope was stronger than fear, that freedom was stronger than chains. The Zephyrians had promised humanity fear. Humanity had responded with hope. And in that exchange, the galaxy itself had been transformed. 10 years had passed since the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, and the galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Ambassador Liu Wei, now bearing a few more gray hairs and laugh lines, stood in the grand assembly of the coalition of free worlds. The massive chamber on Haven Station could hold representatives from over 300 species, and today, every seat was filled. At the center of it all, a ceremony was about to begin that would have been unthinkable just a decade ago. Citizens of the coalition, Liu began, her voice carrying across the vast space. Today marks not just an anniversary, but a new beginning. 10 years ago, humanity went to war. Not a war of conquest, but a war of liberation. Not a war of vengeance, but a war of transformation. And today we welcome the newest full member of our coalition, the Zephyrian Republic. Applause rippled through the assembly, though Liu noticed it wasn't universal. Some representatives from formerly enslaved worlds sat in stony silence. Healing took time, and forgiveness couldn't be mandated. Hexali approached the podium, no longer the underground revolutionary, but now the democratically elected Prime Minister of the Zephyrian Republic. Her scales had gained a healthy sheen, no longer dulled by poverty and oppression. Behind her walked Elder Kixura, serving as Chief Justice of the new Zephyrian Constitutional Court. 10 years ago, Hexali began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. "My people were both prisoners and jailers. We imprisoned others in chains of servitude, while imprisoning ourselves in chains of fear. Today, we stand before you not as conquerors or supremacists, but as equals seeking to contribute to a free galaxy." She paused, looking directly at the sections where former slave species sat. "We know that words are insufficient. No apology can undo centuries of suffering. But we hope our actions speak louder than our words ever could." The holographic displays around the chamber lit up with images. Zephyrian medical ships providing free care to worlds they once oppressed. Zephyrian engineers helping rebuild cities they had once destroyed. Zephyrian teachers sharing knowledge that had been hoarded by the elite. Most remarkably, mixed crews, former slaves, and former masters working side by side on projects that benefited everyone. Not everyone was ready to forgive. Thex, now serving as the Rillan representative, stood to speak. His words were measured, careful. The Rillans remember centuries of oppression. We remember families torn apart, cultures suppressed, lives destroyed. This pain doesn't vanish because our oppressors have apologized. HFY nodded solemnly. We know. We don't ask for forgiveness. We haven't earned it. We ask only for the chance to earn it, through generations of right action. Which is why, Thex continued, surprising many, the Rillan delegation supports the Zephyrian application. Not because we forgive. That's a personal journey each victim must take in their own time. But because we believe in redemption. The humans showed us that. They could have destroyed the Zephyrians, and no one would have blamed them. Instead, they chose transformation. We choose to honor that wisdom. The vote, when it came, was overwhelming, but not unanimous. 278 species voted in favor, 23 abstained, and 12 voted against. But it was enough. The Zephyrian Republic was now officially part of the coalition of free worlds. After the ceremony, Lu found herself in a quiet observation lounge with Admiral Okonkwo, now retired and serving as a military historian. They watched the stars whirl slowly past the station's viewports. Did we do the right thing? Lu asked, a question she'd posed many times over the years. Ask me in another 100 years, Okonkwo replied with a slight smile. But look at what we've built. 100 former slave species now govern themselves. The Zephyrians have become some of our most dedicated healers and builders. And humanity found its purpose, Lu finished. Not as conquerors, but as liberators. Not as rulers, but as teachers. A chime at the door interrupted them. Captain Rex Morrison entered, still commanding the Gambler's Folly, but now as part of the Coalition Defense Force rather than a privateer. Sorry to interrupt the nostalgia, but we've got a situation. Long-range sensors have detected something interesting. He activated a holographic display. Unknown vessels. Design configuration we've never seen before. They're approaching Coalition space. Lu and Okonkwo exchanged glances. First contact scenarios had become almost routine, but each one carried potential for either wonder or danger. Are they broadcasting anything? Lu asked. That's the interesting part. They're broadcasting in an ancient Zephyrian dialect, the one from before their empire. They're asking for asylum. In the Coalition Command Center, representatives from various worlds gathered to assess the situation. The approaching fleet consisted of 47 vessels of unique design, clearly influenced by Zephyrian architecture, but modified with technologies from multiple other species. Prime Minister HFY studied the linguistic analysis. This dialect, it's over 3,000 years old. But there's something else. Computer, overlay star charts from the pre-Empire period with current navigation data. The display shifted, and several representatives gasped. The approaching fleet's trajectory traced back to a region of space marked in ancient Zephyrian charts as the Lost Colony. Impossible, Kisharabrata. The colony ships sent before the plague were all considered destroyed. The lead vessel's commander appeared on screen, clearly Zephyrian in origin, but subtly different. Their scales showed patterns unknown in the modern population, and their eyes held a different quality. Not the hardness of imperial conditioning, but something else. I am Vex Chandra, speaker for the Wanderer Fleet. We are descendants of the Zephyrian colony ship New Horizon, launched 3,400 years ago. We have spent millennia in the void, fleeing from what our homeworld had become. We observed your transformation from afar, watched the Empire fall, and the Republic rise. We come seeking what we never thought possible, a home among our people who have remembered how to hope. The chamber erupted in discussion. Here was living proof of what the Zephyrians could have become without the trauma of the plague, without the fear that had twisted them into conquerors. How many? HFY asked when order was restored. 12 million souls, Vexchandra replied. Zephyrians, yes, but also others. Over the centuries, we encountered other refugee ships. other beings fleeing the Empire's expansion. We became a fleet of the dispossessed, united not by species but by shared loss. We developed our own culture, our own ways. We are Zephyrian, but we are also more. Lou smiled. Then you'll fit right in. The coalition was built on the principle that diversity is strength, that unity doesn't require uniformity. Your request for asylum is granted, pending standard health and security protocols. As the Wanderer fleet approached Haven Station, their ships revealed themselves to be marvels of collaborative engineering. Zephyrian base designs modified with Korthi mathematics, agri-biological systems, and technologies from species the Coalition had never encountered. It was a living example of what cooperation